President Biden had offered his full backing to Ukraine, saying incursions by Russian forces massed on its border would constitute an unacceptable invasion. He says there would be a severe and coordinated economic response from the West, and that retaliation has been laid out very clearly for President Putin. The comments come on the eve of press talk in Geneva between the US and Russia to try to reduce tensions. Meanwhile, the first members of a 30-storm British military team has acquired in Ukraine to have trained local forces in the use of anti-tank weapons. Boris Johnson says any Russian incursions would be a disaster for both countries and the world. It's not just the Russians who are conducting military exercises. There are pictures released by Ukraine's defense ministry showing their forces training close to Crimea that was annexed by Russia in 2014. And the kind of incursion that Ukraine and its allies are trying to deter once again. I've been absolutely clear with the President Putin. He has no misunderstanding if any example Russian units move across Ukrainian border that is an invasion, but it will be met with severe and coordinated economic response. It's some of the most intensive American diplomacy for years. The U.S. Secretary of State has been touring Western capitals. He was in Berlin today, rallying support for Ukraine and appealing directly to the people of Russia. You deserve to live with security, identity, but what really risks for your security is a pointless war with your neighbors in Ukraine. Western allies are threatening Russia with massive economic sanctions. If there's any invasions behind the scenes, there are differences over that those parties who be public masses is united. We are in absolutely close coordination with regard to joint sections because we have an absolutely joint assessment of the situation but also of the reactions with regard to the security of Ukraine. This also applies to sanctions. Press satellite images appear to show how Russia has massed not just troops near Ukraine but also military equipment from Kilomovo to the north to Salaty on Ukraine's eastern border and Novorossiya to the south near Crimea. The diplomacy now moves to the Geneva where Mr. Pliken arrived for talks with his Russian counterpart on Friday. But the discussions at this hotel tomorrow may be difficult because the gap between both sides is so large. The Americans want to talk about avoiding war in Ukraine, but the Russians want to talk about their demands for NATO to step back and also Moscow to establish in a new sphere of influence across Eastern Europe. In eastern Ukraine, they know well that might mean pro-Russian separatists have been fighting government forces here since 2014, and the score are all to see. Antonio Yester is 72 years old and lives close to the front line. Is miracle, which state alive she says we could have died many times. She's pro-Russia and fears a full-scale war. Russia denies that is its intention, but its forces are training hard close to Ukraine. The question now is whether all these exercises might soon become the real thing. Well, James, what hope of a breakthrough in tomorrow's talks between the US and Russia where you are? Well, Clive, I don't think there's any great hope of some great breakthrough tomorrow. The gap between both sides remains large. No new proposals have been flagged up in advance, and there seems little movement on the fundamental. But there are some positive notes out there, just I think the simple fact that the Western Allies is just about managing to maintain its united front and the threat of sanctions to try deter Russia action that is pinning out together by an awful lot of diplomacy on all sides. Boris Johnson spoke to his German counterpart this evening that as British forces, a small group were arriving in Ukraine to have training with some new anti-tank missiles that the UK has delivered, and that said there's no dispute to the fact that this talk are taking place tomorrow has raised some airports and has been seen by some as a good sign. They've been through together at the last minute they are only agreed a couple of days ago. Last week, many people were saying the diplomatic route is over. Well, not quite. And I think the hope is that tomorrow, Anthony Blinken and his Russia counterpart Sergei Lavrov had met for some time, but since well before Christmas, we got a lot of talk about, and the hope is that while the talking continues, at least the prospect is hope is that maybe the fighting is a little bit more distant.